Welcome to Practical Process Mapping. Who are Labria? Labria are an independent consultancy that provide process mapping services, training and facilitated workshops. We have clients ranging from defence, manufacturing, education, IT and software vendors, as well as small local businesses. What is the agenda for this session? What is a process? We'll look at an exercise of trial by numbers. Why do we do it? The value of process, the hierarchy of process. We'll have another exercise of planning a holiday. We'll then move on to the main feature, which is our practical process mapping session. And then we'll finalise with what did we learn and the next steps. So what is a process? According to the International Organization for Standards, a process is a set of interrelated or interacting activities that turn inputs into outputs. A good example of that would be a car, so you'd have steel, which is your input, your manufacturing process, which turns that steel into a finished product, which is a car. A process is measurable. It has unambiguous outcomes. A process has an owner, and each task within that process will be supported by checklists, scripts, templates, or systems. In this first exercise, we're going to go through a trial by numbers. So what we're going to do is just walk through a very simple process. And we're going to start our process off with a number. And that number is going to be 3. We then need to think of a symbol. So I'm going to go with a plus. Our next number is going to be a 2. Another symbol, which is going to be a multiply. And then we'll have a number, which is going to be a 5. So what's the total of that? 25. Now you successfully created the process as I've asked, but what was the total? Does it equal 33? Well, of course it doesn't. How can you deliver an output when you don't know what that output should be? So we call these outputs deliverables. So get to know what your deliverables are. What is the purpose of process? Put simply, to achieve the same desired outcome every time, and that's regardless of who does it and regardless of load or how busy you are. So why do people go through all the time and energy to capture processes? Well, people capture processes so they can provide clarity to staff and customers, identify who's responsible for a task, identify the output of that process, and identify who receives the output of the process. It's a good mechanism for ensuring the transfer of knowledge between individuals and to measure how good or indeed how bad a process is. And if we think about that for a moment, there's nothing wrong with a bad process, providing it's consistently bad and it fails at the same point, which means you can change something. If it's better, you leave the change in. If it's even worse, you take the change out and you change activities until the process as a whole improves. We can also use processes to identify bottlenecks or single points of failure in a process. And bottlenecks are the constraints within a process, and single points of failure are where you only have one individual that could perform a task, and if they're unavailable it doesn't happen. And we can only then, once we've got a process mapped out, understand how they could be improved. What is the value of process? Organisations get no value from the activities you do. I'm going to leave that to sink in for a second. Organisations get no value from the activities that you do. Activities attract a cost. They are the necessary catalyst to produce the output, and we call these outputs deliverables. It's these deliverables that add value to an organisation. The hierarchy of process and other associated documents. This is often drawn as a pyramid, but I've shown it as a sequence of steps. So if we look at the highest level here and we look at policies, these are the set of strategic directives set by the senior leadership team, which are setting out the organisation's intent. These should be fairly small, lightweight documents and shouldn't have any guidance note, processes, procedures, or frameworks within these policies. We often use terms like shall and will within these types of document. These are not to be confused with mission statements, which might have an example such as we will manufacture widgets to within 1 decimal point of their required tolerance every time and be the best manufacturer in the world within 5 years. So that's a policy. Underneath policy, which doesn't have any processes within it, are the processes themselves. And these are the sets of activities that transform input into outputs. They operate at a high level across many functions within the organization, and they describe of what is being done and not how it's being done. And it's to support the strategic view of what's been set down by the policies. Underneath the processes, we have the procedures. The procedures are how we perform those processes, and they're often got control mechanisms within them as well. They will also contain further information or guidance notes about how a process is executed. At the bottom layer, we have the work instructions, or some people call them standard operating procedures. And these describe the step-by-step instructions on exactly how to perform a task. These will be more detailed, and they will often include things like screenshots and step 1, log on, step 2, open Excel, step 3, open time and attendance XLS. Small bite-sized pieces of information. Using a methodology to support your process mapping activities. As we've already outlined, there's no value in activities, only their outputs or deliverables. Utilizing a methodology that promotes the production of an output will be quite different for some people who have mapped before. Our approach is to use the noun-verb method. Thinking about the noun-verb methodology and describing the activity that needs to be done is your verb. So think about what the activity is being performed and ask the question, how do I, in front of it. So an activity should read correctly if you say, how do I build a server? So typical verbs could be build, send, release, install, along with complete, conduct, investigate, to name but a few. Nouns are going to be a physical thing, so it could be a house, it could be a message, it could be a document, it could be a piece of software, it could be a signed order form, it could be anything, but physically you would be showing what that thing is. Thinking about deliverables now. So the deliverable is an output of the activity. Ask what the required deliverable is from a task. And when you're writing that deliverable, imagine show me the in front of the deliverable name and it should read correctly. Just remember the deliverable from one activity as an output may be the input to the next. We've now come to our next exercise and we're going to be going on holiday. So consider the steps within the process of booking a holiday. What are the inputs? What are the activities? And what are the deliverables that you need to complete the transaction? And we're going to be following this process through with input, activity, deliverable, activity, deliverable, activity, and then the ultimate output or final deliverable. So we are now going to look to process map going on a holiday. And you'll see across the top of the screen here we've got all of our deliverables or our inputs and outputs in blue, and underneath we have all of the activities. Now a good place to start is trying to get your process map bookended, and what we mean by that is identify the start point. So if we think about going on holiday, the trigger point from the available options that I have are I have a requirement for my holiday. And rather than going through the activities now step by step, I want to get my goalpost in. So what am I aiming towards? What does good look like? So I'm going to say I'm at my destination. I'm going to put that over on the far right hand side. So now I can start thinking about my first activity. So out of the 8 options that I've got, I can either apply for my leave, I can book the holiday, or I can choose the type of holiday. Some of these can be quite ambiguous, but if we're thinking about it technically, then what we probably should do is apply for our leave first. Now you could argue you could choose your type of holiday first and then apply for your leave, but these are quite interchangeable. So if we look at applying for our leave, what's the evidence of that is I should have my confirmed leave dates. I can now look to choose the type of holiday that I want, and I might be going on to a beach resort, I might be having a city break, or I might choose to go skiing. Once I've decided what my type of holiday is going to be, I can now book that holiday, which should give me a confirmation email. We could decide to do a couple of different options here. We could look to now organise our transport, or we could look to select our clothing to take. So I'm actually going to organise the transport next, and that could take a number of forms. So we could get to where we're going by taxi, we could be using our own car, or we could be using a friend or family member. So the next stage is to select the appropriate items of clothing to take. So in this case, I'm going to have some clothes, and I'm also going to have some equipment with me as well. So I might have skis, or I might have snorkeling equipment, and I might also put a list together of the items that I've packed. I can then pack my bags, and those bags are then by the front door, and I can check in, which will give me a boarding pass. And then once I have my boarding pass, I can travel to the destination. Now I do have these vaccination requirements just floating around at the top here, and this could mean different things to different people. We could place it at the beginning of the process to say I'm not going to go anywhere until I've identified what vaccinations I need, and to make sure I've got enough time to get them. Or I don't want to have a vaccination, so I won't look to book that type of venue. We could also have it though as an output of booking the holiday. So as part of that booking of the holiday, they could tell you what your vaccination requirements are. A number of these steps could be done in any number of orders. Certainly here, applying for leave and choosing the type of holiday, you could certainly switch those over. But there's a major flaw in this process, and if we assume for a moment my type of holiday is a city break, and my type of transport is going to be my own car, because I'm just driving 200 miles up to a picturesque village somewhere, the process at the back end here that says check in to give me a boarding pass doesn't actually make any sense. And there I have travelled to a destination. So there is certainly a flaw in the process for sure, and we could look to introduce some decision points, but we're looking to keep this to a minimum along the process, just so it doesn't turn into a flowchart or of a decision tree of do this, do that, do this, do that. But this is certainly flawed because it assumes that we're flying. All processes will hang together in the same way. We start with a trigger point, we have an end point, and then we populate everything in between. Practical process mapping. Introducing the Miggins and Miggins case study. We should now all understand the basic principles of creating a process map using the noun-verb methodology. The Miggins and Miggins case study has been designed to simulate the different types of formats that process information can be found within most organisations. It's deliberately set up to be ambiguous, incomplete, or even wrong. So, how much is enough? We'll be looking at one of the three functional areas with the aim of creating a simple 4 or 5 stage process with inputs, activities and outputs. The information required is present but might be a challenge to identify. So, how much is enough? This comes back to the definition of what a process is. The purpose of the process is to describe what needs to be done and not how to do it. A process is not there to train new starters from no experience to an expert. We should consider the person conducting the process is competent to perform it. Welcome to the Miggins & Miggins case study. This case study is available from our website. This presentation will take you through the sales process, but you may wish to read the full case study found here at www.labria.co.uk/training-materials/Miggins. Miggins & Miggins Company background. Founded in 2004, Miggins & Miggins are a professional services company who conduct on-site inspections and provide clients with a report of their findings. The company was a brainchild of David Miggins, who started it with his wife Sarah. In the early years, Sarah took care of all the administration, sales and back office functions, and David took care of all the on-site work. The company has grown organically over the years and has a whatever it takes to get the job done approach. Sales have been growing steadily over the years, but recently have plateaued, and there's been a reduction in repeat business. The company organisation chart or organogram shows that the operations director position is currently vacant after the previous position holder had an unexpected windfall and left without notice. David used to look after the consultancy team and has stepped into the role to do what he can, but the way the team operate now is very different to how he used to work in the early days. And we can see that the organisation has 5 people within the sales team, 3 people within operations, and 4 people within finance. The Miggins & Miggins sales team. The core purpose of the function is to process the new business, add it into the system and pass all the required information to the consultant that will deliver the work. Sales orders are received via the online portal, telephone sales and hard copy or emailed orders. There is some written documentation in the department, and this includes 2 different types of customer order form, a terms and conditions document, a recharging expenses guidance document, and a sales order processing procedure. There is friction between the sales team and most other functions, especially finance, with repeated requests to find a salesperson who put the order on the system to clarify the details of the sale and the recharging of expenses. As a function, sales has a high turnover of staff. Some investigation work has been done to find out why this is, but has been inconclusive, but anecdotal feedback has been that staff are not sure what they are responsible for, who is doing it, and when. So the sales procedure states all employees must follow this procedure in accordance with the type of order being processed and the requirements of the sale. Approval must be obtained from the relevant director if deviating from the process. We require all orders to have a signed terms and conditions from the customer. For existing customers, we should have a copy on file. If one is not present, send a copy to the customer and obtain signature before proceeding with the order. This is not necessary for orders that have been received via the online portal, as there is a checkbox for the customer to digitally sign. Transcribe the order details from verbal written order onto a customer order form. This must then be input into the sales order processing system, and new customers must be credit checked before proceeding to book the order with a consultant. Credit checks are conducted by finance but are only acted upon request. We will always charge expenses to the customers in accordance with the expenses guidance document. An estimate of expenses should be provided to the customer prior to confirmation of the order, along with a confirmed visit date. It's the responsibility of each employee to check the availability of the consultant before accepting the order. Failure to comply will result in disciplinary action. Dates can be found in the shared calendar on the common drive. Please use the right web browser for viewing the calendar, as it may not appear correctly. Before the order is passed over to operations for processing, the following details must be added to the order and placed in status code SOR, Sales Order Raised. The order number must be added, site address, contact name, and the requested date, and you must allow 2 weeks from the current date. If any of the details are unclear, seek guidance. We have a terms and conditions document, which the customer needs to sign at the bottom, and we have our recharging expenses guidance. And all expenses, according to the guidance document, are to be recharged at cost. We charge all our customers' expenses except for those who have an exemption clause in their contract. Currently, the following customers have an agreement in place: Urban Arboretum, ASR Limited, G&J Facilities, and Grover SARL. All orders must have a line item with an estimate of expenses added to them to enable charges to be successfully applied. The following items are valid expenses: hotel and subsistence, business mileage, airline tickets, train tickets, and consumable items used between the visit, such as disposable test samples and disposable PEE. We have the Miggins & Miggins customer order form, and we have the MM1072 customer order form. Going through the sales procedure and the background information, I've extracted what I believe to be the activities and the deliverables within the process. How have I done that? So if we look at the original process, and if we look through as to how sales orders come through, we can see they're received via the online portal, telephone sales, hard copy, and emailed orders. And what we've identified here is we have emailed orders. If I just drop that down the bottom there, hard copy orders, online orders, and telephone orders. Coming back to the procedure, if I look at this endpoint here, before the order is passed to operation for processing, the following details must be added and the order placed in status code SOR, Sales Order Raised. So I've determined from that the endpoint is the order is at Sales Order Status SOR. Going through the process or the procedure document, I can look to identify the activities that are part of that. And so the procedure talks about terms and conditions and going to get terms and conditions if they're not held on file. So I've chosen to create an activity called Ensure Terms and Conditions are held on file, and how that's done you could have in a procedure which will indicate that you need to go out to get the terms and conditions signed from a customer if we don't already have them. And the deliverable then from that, and the thing that we can prove, is our signed copy of the terms and conditions. The next thing the procedure is talking about is making sure that we have a credit check. So next up, once we've got our terms and conditions, I can say, is a credit check required? And this is where I'm having my decision point. And instead of having yes or no, I can have my credit check that's required or a credit check that's not required. If a credit check is required, the procedure says that we need to request it from the finance team. So there's our activity there of request a check from the finance team. And what would typically come back from a finance team would be a credit score. And I'm going to assume in this particular process that the credit score is acceptable. If it wasn't acceptable, you might have some special conditions applied to the customer, for example, cash on delivery or something like that, but we're going to assume that they are acceptable in this particular example. We can then look to transcribe the order details onto the customer order form, as the procedure said, once we've completed all of our paper-based versions. And once that's been transcribed onto the form, we have a completed sales order form. And we can actually treat this as, if we look at the credit checks not required, this can actually be the same trigger point where we've got a credit check not required or an acceptable credit score, both going to the same point. We can then look to enter the order onto the system, which will then put me in sales order status SOR. But I have seen some of the other activities within the procedure which talk about check the consultant's diary and look at the expenses and place the order in status SOR and provide those details to the customer. But instead of blocking this up on the top level process, so if we think about this as just a high level 4 or 5 steps, I could actually move this down into a lower level sub process of entering the details onto the system. So if we think about that, then the first thing that we should look to be doing is to calculate those expenses, which gives us our expenses estimate, and we can then check the consultant's diary, and we can also provide the details to the customer at the same time, which will give us our available dates. And then once we've done that, we can enter the details to place it into the status SOR. So actually we could actually pick it up further from there. And some of the details that we can put in are these contact names, the order number, the requested dates, and the site address. So it's about breaking it down into smaller bite-sized pieces. So that gives us an overview now of the process itself as it's currently documented. So we can see that we have 4 start points, and thinking about the online portal orders, because we don't need to have terms and conditions according to the procedure signed because there's a checkbox, we can move that from the beginning of the process straight the way through into transcribing the details into MM 1072. So a very, very simple process, and I've not used a BPM tool here. This is just using a whiteboard just to storyboard the idea, and what you can start to do is then link your processes up if you were doing this as a workshop. And I'm just going to draw a very crude arrow between them just so you know which order things go in. So that's the first basis of our process. Just continue there just to draw those final lines in. Very simple, logical, and I don't have to do a lot of reading. Now there's no reason why I can't link to the forms or the procedures from this process, but it does give us a good starting point so everybody knows what they should be doing. We spoke with a representative from Miggins & Miggins sales team to find out what the process that they follow is. And here's what they said. I know that the sales order form MM1072 is used for online orders, and there's another version that's used when taking over the phone, but nearly all of the sales team don't think it's necessary and make manual notes and enter it into the system. I didn't know there was another form and why it's different or what it's used for. I keep my own list of people that don't pay expenses. I'm aware of the guidance note, but it hasn't been updated in ages and some are no longer customers. We should get commission on our sales, and we haven't recently, so we do whatever needs to be done to close the sale. We tend to book the order and argue about the visit dates later. Some of us offer dates to customers and put it on the order but don't check the calendar first or put it in as a date on hold. We find the sales procedure confusing as it doesn't tell you what order to do things in. Doing a credit check sometimes takes too long, so most of us put the order on the system anyway without having to wait for the score. I have had no formal training in the sales process. What I and most of my team do is to make sure that we have a signed copy of the terms and conditions, get a credit score from accounts, find a consultant to do the work. Most of us know who's free. We're supposed to check the calendar and put a date in. We then enter the order details into the system and we're supposed to provide an estimate to the client. Once all of this is done, the order details and the site address is then passed over to operations. What did we learn? Just because there are documents in existence, it does not mean that people know where they are, that they are followed, that they are current or reviewed on a regular basis, or people are responsible and accountable for the tasks that they contain. The next steps. Once the processes have been documented, we can look to identify issues in the process, such as bottlenecks, single points of failure, waste, and adoption. Labria run regular workshops which cover these topics, along with reviewing and training on business process tools and hosting discussion forums. Do you have time on your hands? Have a play with process. If you like doing the going on holiday exercise, we have an online jigsaw puzzle version that you can do on your PC or mobile. Take a look at labria.co.uk/training-materials/puzzle-page. Support from Labria. We're offering a free 1-hour consultation to discuss your processes. We are also looking to help you kickstart your process discovery by mapping one of your basic processes that will help you on your process mapping journey. If you want to build up your process collection, we can support you in identifying a business critical process which can be captured and shared on an online workshop, and a good example of this may be onboarding a new member of staff. So sources of information, if you'd like to contact us, you can email victoria.hormigo@labria.co.uk or paul.elson-vining@labria.co.uk, or give us a call on +44 118 38 00 856, or visit our website www.labria.co.uk. To take a look at our full programme of events, take a look at labria.co.uk/events. Thank you for your time.